On November 28, 1979, Air New Zealand Flight 901 departed Auckland on a sightseeing flight to Antarctica. The state-of-the-art DC-10 aircraft carried 237 passengers and 20 crew, who were looking forward to an adventure of a lifetime. But the flight would end in an explosive tragedy on the icy slopes of Mount Erebus, within Antarctica's frozen interior. What happened that day is a story of fatal human error, a flawed investigation, misplaced blame, lies, and betrayal. It is the story of 257 innocent lives lost and the search for truth and justice that followed. This is the dire tale of the Mount Erebus air disaster. In the 1970s, Antarctica captured the imagination of the world. A remote continent of wonder and extremes, it had only been explored piecemeal over the previous century. With its vast icy landscapes and exotic wildlife, Antarctica fired people's dreams of adventure. In 1977, Air New Zealand and Qantas started offering commercial scenic flights to Antarctica. Passengers could marvel at glaciers, icebergs, and penguin colonies from comfort and safety. The 10-12-hour round-trip flights were a chance to glimpse a wild frontier. For New Zealanders, Antarctica lay claim to their national identity. Great explorers like Edmund Hillary had forged links between the two lands. Now, Air New Zealand could bring a little of the glory within every man's reach. Their ad spoke of former explorers and the lonely land of Scott, Shackleton, and Bird. The flights left from Auckland, stopping in Christchurch, New Zealand before crossing the Southern Ocean. An Antarctic expert provided narration for the sightseeing passengers during the flight over the icy continent. Passengers relaxed in reclining seats and enjoyed in-flight meals, drinks, and movies. The magically frozen view out the window was spectacle enough. The trip cost around 275 New Zealand dollars, but was worth every penny. Passenger surveys returned rave reviews. A former passenger from another flight, Raylene Ramsey, summed it up. "It was like being on another planet. I'll never forget it." Between 1977 and 1979, over 10,000 people enjoyed Antarctica this way. Flights operated at around 85% capacity, with some empty seats allowing passengers to move around. On November 28, 1979, Flight 901 is set to depart at 8:30 a.m. The crew assembled at Auckland Airport to begin preparations. The crew included Captain Jim Collins, an experienced pilot with over 11,000 flight hours. Though new to Antarctic routes, the captain had completed a qualification flight weeks earlier. In the role of first officer was Greg Casson, aged 37, with over 7,900 flight hours. This is also his first Antarctic flight. And lastly, there was flight engineer Gordon Brooks, 43, a seasoned veteran with almost 11,000 hours under his belt. He's also been to Antarctica just once before. The men review weather reports and flight plans as per standard procedure. With Captain Collins's job to ensure the safety of all aboard, Casson and Brooks will support him in piloting, navigation, and systems management to ensure a safe and enjoyable flight. Though Antarctica has risks, the crew is relaxed and confident because they've been trained for this, and will follow the proper routes and altitudes which have already been pre-planned and approved. What could go wrong on a routine sightseeing flight? At 8:21 a.m., the gleaming DC-10 taxis and takes off into a clear dawn sky. The passengers are buzzing. Only a handful have been to Antarctica before. As Auckland shrinks beneath them, it feels like the start of an adventure. The first hours of the flight to Antarctica were smooth and routine. Passengers relaxed in the wide cabin, snapping photos out the window and listening to the audio commentary from veteran Antarctic guide Peter Mulgrew. The skies were dazzlingly clear over the Southern Ocean, putting Antarctica's mountain ranges into sharp focus. By early afternoon, the DC-10 had reached the Ross Ice Shelf and was approaching Mount Erebus on Ross Island, Mulgrew pointing out the distinctive land features over the PA system. The plane began its descent towards McMurdo Sound, with Collins receiving descent clearance from air traffic control at McMurdo Station. A layer of clouds hung at around 1,500 feet. Collins executed a figure-8 holding pattern to descend through a gap in the clouds, giving passengers closer views of the landscape below. This clears them down almost 5,000 feet lower than the minimum safe altitude, but having radar guidance over flat terrain seems safe. Previous flights did the same. However, As the plane leveled off, Collins and his crew suddenly found themselves in a fog of flat light. The white snow and clouds blended seamlessly into the horizon, obscuring the looming volcano directly ahead. This was sector whiteout, a phenomenon not well understood by researchers and nearly impossible to detect by the pilots. At 12:49 p.m., McMurdo receives the last radio call from Flight 901. The DC-10 is 12 miles north of the base, crossing Lewis Bay bound for Mount Erebus, then silence. By 2 p.m., McMurdo is concerned. Aircraft are scrambled in a search and rescue mission, but it will be many hours before the appalling truth is discovered. Far above, the cloud cover parts to reveal Erebus's white flanks. The crew keeps descending. Now, under 1,500 feet, unbeknownst to them, they only have seconds left to live. Before the crew even had time to react, the ground proximity alarms began blaring warnings in the cockpit. Terrain! Terrain! Pull up! Pull up! The crew is not only confused, but cannot see anything due to the pure whiteout conditions. It was too late. At 12:50 p.m. local time, the DC-10 collided with the slopes of Mount Erebus at an altitude of just 1,500 feet, exploding instantly on impact. Within seconds, the wreckage and bodies were scattered across the mountainside, coming to rest soon after impact on a slope overlooking the Sound. The tragedy would send shockwaves across New Zealand and the world for the 257 lives that were extinguished in a moment. Down below, the communities of McMurdo Station and Scott Base are unaware of the tragedy unfolding above. The radio falls silent. Minutes turn into hours as the skies remain devoid of aircraft until the terrible news comes. In the pre-dawn light, search planes circle Mount Erebus. Through billowing cloud, they glimpse the first signs of wreckage on a rugged slope. The terrible reality dawns. There can be no survivors. Recovery teams are dispatched from McMurdo Station. They land on Erebus and trek uphill through ankle-deep snow. Emerging from the mist, the debris field appears. A scar strewn with twisted metal, suitcases, clothes, and human remains. Death arrived with sudden, brutal impact. The men comb through the wreck methodically. They are scientists, mountaineers, and police, far from home and utterly unprepared for this horrific task. Many victims are torn apart or burned beyond recognition. The men collect bodies, photographs, and dental records, anything that might aid identification. It is harrowing work. As they toil, ice crystals glint in the sun. The mountain's pristine beauty feels like a mockery of so many stolen lives. The men are exhausted and numb, their senses dulled from the trauma. They stop only to sleep and eat before resuming the grim search. 260 miles north in Christchurch, stunned families keep vigil at the airport. They scan the skies in desperation, refusing to abandon hope. But as night falls, dread sinks in. Something has gone terribly wrong. By morning, the truth is out. Erebus has claimed them all. At the recovered crash site, death's silence is broken by the thudding of helicopters. The remains of the lost are flown down the mountain in cargo nets. The long path of grief has begun. In June 1980, New Zealand's Chief Inspector of Air Accidents issues his report into the crash. Immediately, he blames the pilots for descending too low without proper visibility. The public is outraged. Air New Zealand's in-flight magazine has photos of previous flights hugging Erebus's slopes. Pilots call the report a whitewash. Under pressure, the government orders a royal commission of inquiry, led by Justice Peter Mahon. This will become one of the most far-reaching and controversial crash investigations ever. Over 10 arduous months and 66 days of hearings, Mahon and his team reconstruct those fatal minutes. They probe deeper into the airline's operations and culture. Dark secrets emerge into the light. It turns out that Air New Zealand headquarters had changed the flight plan coordinates before takeoff, without ever telling the crew. The new path went directly over Erebus, instead of down McMurdo Sound as intended. The whiteout conditions meant the pilots couldn't see the looming mountain ahead, and McMurdo had cleared them down below minimum safe altitude. The stage was set for disaster. In his 1981 report, Mahon accuses Air New Zealand of covering up errors with an orchestrated litany of lies. He also blasts the original report as a slapdash effort by an official out of his depth. The airline hits back. A long legal battle follows as Mon tries to make his findings stick. Air New Zealand ultimately escapes censure, but its reputation is in tatters. In March 1980, a funeral is held for the 44 unidentified victims of Flight 901. It is the first goodbye for grieving families, but not the last. The fight for truth, accountability, and justice drags on. Air New Zealand issues statements faulting the pilots. It takes court action to suppress Mon's findings. For the families, it feels like losing their loved ones all over again. In the decades that follow, the legacy of the crash is monumental. It ends sightseeing flights to Antarctica and hastens the demise of Air New Zealand's aging DC-10 fleet. Demands grow for greater transparency in air accident investigations. Yet vindication for Justice Mon's reporting only comes in 1999, 18 years after his death. Even then, it happens quietly. Vital lessons from Erebus go unheeded. The victims' families campaign relentlessly to clear their loved ones' names. After 40 years, their dedication is rewarded. In 2019, Air New Zealand issues an apology and finally accepts full responsibility. But the wound remains open. The wreckage still lies exposed on Erebus, preserved by the cold. Metal shards protrude from ice and snow. Visible from the sky, it remains a grave for those who perished, a reminder never to forget. Air New Zealand Flight 901 stands among history's great aviation tragedies. The toll was immense: 257 dead, 227 of them passengers. Time has not diminished the grief of those left behind, yet from the loss came progress. Air disasters are now investigated much more rigorously. Cockpit recordings and flight data aid in detailed analysis, leading to deeper understanding of how a particular crash actually unfolded. Airlines now embrace more transparency overall, instead of denial. On the icy flanks of Erebus, the dead are at peace. Their memory endures in the hearts of those they left behind. Though claimed by Antarctica, they will never be forgotten. So, what are your thoughts? Leave a comment below. Your voice matters. If you found this video thought-provoking, please give it a like, and remember to subscribe to the channel to stay updated on more dire tales right as they are released. Thanks for watching.